best from here will go and compete at the regional level as Governance for Africa in partnership with Tax Justice Network Africa that also have helped us to have this event take place. I will continue. This will be always, it will be annual. So we hope to always have such kind of competitions with young people, mostly young people, youth participation in decision lawmaking. This is where we get who is the best, who can be a leader, who is fit to be where, and also I think this is the best way to go. Information dissemination is our fundamental objective. So if we don't inform, if we don't analyze, if we don't do research, if we don't advocate, then we'll not be doing our role. So basically, the debate is coming to an end, and we are very happy the way it took place. Everyone is very excited. The information from there, when you listen to the analysis from the students, you get to know that we have potential to solve our challenges as Rwanda, as the continent of Africa. I want to recognize our partners, our strong partners, the Tax Justice Network Africa. They have helped us to make this inter-university to national level a success. We have been partners before, and we are still doing the partnership. So I really want to thank them and to recommend them for the good work they are doing. And as Governance for Africa, we commit to continuously working together for a united and a prosperous Africa.
We're very happy to be in Kigali this week for very many reasons, but the main ones being partnering with Governance for Africa in the first ever students' debate in Rwanda on tax justice and illicit financial flows. We are also here to launch the official African campaign against illicit financial flows called the Stop the Bleeding campaign, and especially happy to be here to launch as well the Rwanda National Tax Platform, which will be happening later on this week. It's a fantastic opportunity for TGNA and Governance for Africa to solidify its partnership that exists particularly through our sub-regional network called the East African Tax and Governance Network, whose aim is to support civil society in the East African community to promote accountable, just and fair tax systems in the region. It's especially important and special for us to be here in Kigali this week because just recently the Republic of Rwanda, through His Excellency Paul Kagame, have taken over as the Africa Union chair, and quite an important moment for the continent given the progress that the Republic of Rwanda has made over the past decade and a half or so on so many fronts, both economically, politically and socially. We look forward to deepening our partnership with Governance for Africa in mobilizing and supporting students, politicians, members of parliament, policymakers and civil society in Rwanda to push forward the tax justice agenda and push forward the fight against illicit financial flows from our continent. It's been a great week. It is my sincere hope that the students from the different universities that came out to participate in the debate had a good time. They've learned something. They are now aware about the work that Tax Justice Network Africa does, and together with our partnership with Governance for Africa, we hope that we are going to deepen that relationship. So thank you very much, and we look forward to doing this all over again in the not so distant future.
So happy for these great competitions, but more so for having emerged the best among the best. I can't forget to thank the organizers of this, and I would actually say they should maintain the spirit, as it will actually always enable us as young Rwandans, as young Africans, to express our ideas that can contribute to at least socio-economic transformation of our respective countries, more so the region of East Africa and the entire continent of Africa at large.
I'm Hope Shari, a student at Kenya University. Kigali, Rwanda. I wasn't surprised because I had really prepared to win this debate. The most difficult part of the debate was proving or having the statistics or the evidence that supports the motion in question.
Thank you. I'm called Joyce Mukarubiza, a lecturer in the University of Kibungo, UNIC, the former INATEC, in the Faculty of Economics. I've been here in this competition as a judge, one of the judges, that managed to compile and get the results of the winners. The marks were given on 3 categories. How does the student master the content? What are the style has he used or she used while presenting his ideas? Then what are the styles, the strategies did he use, either reading, either research, Then, and we looked at the rebuttals. How did he come back to the competitor, to his counterpart? We had opposers and proposer sides. What we can take in mind is that even the private schools, the private universities are coming up with high quality standards to the extent that we've seen the private have bet or have won the government universities, which is something that now I can say education in Rwanda, the universities are now on the same level.
This workshop stretches for far as taxes are vital to the development of any nation. Rwanda Revenue Authority is committed to work and continually support this national network on taxation and tax governance, always the coordinators, Governance for Africa, and Action Aid Rwanda. Feel free to directly contact our office for any related partnership as we gently achieve. I once again thank you the organizers of this workshop for their great work. Finally, on behalf of Rwanda Revenue Authority, I open this workshop officially. Thank you.
Let me also take this opportunity to welcome you here in this room. On behalf of the country director of Action Aid Rwanda, I'm pleased to be here. And I've been given a message to give you on this day. Our guest of honor, Deputy Commissioner General from RRA, members from government institutions, our visitors, our guests from across Africa, members of civil society organizations, the media, you are all most welcome. We are gathered here today to talk about the illicit financial flows, like this stated here, and in this respect, the Rwandan perspective. If we recall very well what illicit financial flows is, by definition, you can say it is movement of money from one country to another, illegally, in brief. So, I'm sure you've been following the trend of this, what has been taking place in Africa or in the continent. According to the report released by the former South African President Thabo Mbeki in 2015, it indicated that Africa loses around 50 billion annually as illicit financial flows. That is in Africa, and remember Rwanda is in Africa. So what does it communicate to Rwandans? So it means that even in Africa, the illicit financial flows is taking place. So that's why we are holding this workshop to shed more light on what is happening across Africa in the world in general. So the experts on tax justice in Africa are here. Experts on tax in Rwanda, they are here from different institutions. I can see them. They are going to tell us the perspective, the global perspective, the African perspective, and the Rwandan perspective, so that we can be able to see what is happening and then propel us to take actions as Rwandese.
In Rwanda, yes, we have that challenge as a tax administration meeting. We've been meeting several occasions where money is being earned illegally by the traders, by the businessmen, by everybody. The true invoice which is presented to customs is reduced by 50%. If you give your EBM invoice on a true value, you are going to send the information into RRA systems that show a very big profit margin, which you cannot actually support. So what he does, either don't give the EBM or give an EBM that on a reduced value, which you've been seeing all over the place. So that's one of the illegal earnings of money which someone is practicing. There is another experience of mutating companies. They've been seeing a company is born today, it's registered by RDB, and after 6 or 8 months, the company is no longer there, a new one is born. Those companies there are many and they've been mutating, they are born today, die, and then another company. But if you go to trace what they call the beneficial owners, sometimes it's not even easy to trace. The beneficial ownership is, it's not actually the challenge of Rwanda or in an African environment alone. In an African perspective, we are still fighting with the local concern, the local perspective, what is happening. We are importing and we still depend on a lot of importations. We need to know the true information about those importations.
We've seen from the video, the continent is bleeding. And it's our people who suffer from the consequences. Because if the government is supposed to meet our economic rights, our social rights, and the money is being taken away from the government, then how will the government help the people to get access to education, to get access to water and sanitation and other things? So it's our matter to take up and fight these illicit financial flows. There were some questions like the last one about politicians, and others. He asked about if there are cases in Rwanda concerning illicit financial flows, but how can you know the cases when you don't have statistics, when you don't track it? The first thing about illicit financial flows is to track it. Because you will not know something, you have not tried to find out what's taking place, what's going on in our country. Are companies transferring money illegally? Are politicians transferring money illegally? Because it's like a type of illicit financial flows if maybe a politician makes the use of his power, gets a bag full of dollars, goes to the airport, and flies away to Europe with the money. That's illicit financial flows. So what we have to do, I think the civil society, mostly they have to find a way to take this matter forward. Maybe create a network about these illicit financial flows. It's not Governance for Africa or Action Aid that is supposed to be bringing this matter to our country. It's the whole civil society. So I would urge organizations that are in the House, even those, you can take a message, those that are not present, that we have to create a network that can work on illicit financial flows in our country and the continent at large. But first, we are in Rwanda, we have to start from here.
Looking at the
competitions that were here for inter-universities in Rwanda. But now, I wish to comment on this, but still giving my contribution. More especially, I was so much interested in this as it's my domain. We've been teaching these things as illicit financial frauds, as causes and what, and you give examples, but you fail to have the real picture of the country that we are in. It's my pleasure that I'm here and I'm speaking much, but I feel I want to talk about something. Maybe from the domain, you're going to assist me. I'm not going to be so much political. I'll be technical as someone is in the domain. If we want to eradicate illicit financial frauds, we need to look at the sources. Where does it come from? And what is the origin of this issue? Of course, I cannot stay to say that we have it in Rwanda, though people have been smearing on it, putting cosmetics on it, but sincerely it's there. I mean, technically it's there. Now, I do ask myself, how do you guys run a revenue, if and other people? How do you control this issue of mobile money? And it's among the facilitating of the illicit financial frauds. How are the strategies? How are the tools of looking at it?
As a tax administration, we have that we have access to that information whenever and wherever we want to use it. So it's easy for the tax administration to obtain that data and say, if, for example, I want to, as a risk rule, if I want to say how many people did a transaction in a given period of time between 500,000 and 20 million, I can obtain that information with ease and do my analysis, what I want to analyze. So I have access to that information, so I don't think there is a need of controlling it. Related to the business fraud, the trade facilitation is a government policy, and automation is a government policy. So what we want is to have access to that information whenever and wherever we want to use it.
Agenda 2063, which was passed in 2015 at the AU, the Agenda 2030 by the UN, even the high fives of the African Development Bank all focus on African countries being able to mobilize resources for their own development. The problem with that is if we continue to lose money in taxes and illicit outflows, we will never have enough money to be able to raise for our own development as a continent. Corruption amounts to about 5% of how much outflows leave the continent. And the reason it's so low is not because it's not important, it's because corruption enables every other aspect of illicit financial flows. So weak governance, weak public institutions, corruption and criminal activities, and even conflict and insecurity, these are some of the impacts of illicit financial flows. Obviously, the development aspect is there. For the more illicit financial flows that leave the continent, we cannot develop our infrastructure. Africa's capital stock was meant to have gone up to about 60%, with our GDP going up to 15%. Unfortunately, because of how much has been lost, about 80 billion annually, this is not possible. It's basically a coalition of institutions that are willing to join the fight against illicit financial flows. It includes the African Union, the United Nations, Tax Justice Network, and even external forces like Global Financial Integrity and World Trade Organization. The idea behind it is to work to implement all 35 recommendations of the high-level panel report. All recommendations focus on the three areas of IFFs: the commercial, the corrupt, and also the criminal. So by implementing these recommendations, or rather by working together to implement these recommendations, the idea is that each of the different member states, all 54 member states, will have every aspect of IFFs that they deal with addressed. This includes countries like Nigeria, South Africa, where extractive industries are more vulnerable to illicit financial flows as opposed to other countries where they deal with more financial aspects.
If we look around in the general perspective, we have set a number of laws, and these laws, if you really want to see what each institution is doing, they are all in line with fighting what is not legal. Where most of our businesses are originating, have tax treaties. So all these kind of regulations are actually helping in two things. One is getting the right information from this country. Two, you have also access of tracing these most multinationals that are involved in illicit financial fraud.
In these few days that we've been here, we are thinking of focusing on issues of tax. So we obviously linking tax to various issues within the countries. We are thinking of focusing on issues of trade and regional integration, the issues of fiscal governance, and the issues of strengthening the network, and therefore strengthening the members within the network. So these are the four main directions we'd like to go about.
It was first a linkage between civil society, private sector, and public institutions. And I want to thank very much our brothers from our public institutions. The questions, that's civil society, that's how we ask. Actually today we have been disciplined, but it doesn't mean we don't love our country. If someone says we need to know the statistics and someone will tell you, you know, you are hiding it. You know, they were so political and diplomatic in saying that. The way forward, Mr. Gahamanyi, first of all, we are lucky from this linkage between civil society and public institution. The Deputy Commissioner General invited us. We'll get a few to represent civil society in their planning meeting. As Leonard Wanyama was saying, we had financial challenges. But this is one way. We had a report, Governance for Africa produced a national report where we worked with the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning. It was strictly on tax governance. The meeting today, we are still mapping out who is doing what, who can help us on tax justice and tax governance. That's why we had to invite research institutions. So joining, first of all, we believe, this is one we believe in implementation. We are still doing the mapping. You can't talk about human rights without discipline with the money. That's where the violation starts from. We have religious leaders here. We have research institutions. We have students. So I think that's the best way. The network, already this is the network, and we are still mapping. We are happy that at the national level, we are working hand in hand with Action Aid. And thank you so much, James and the team.